Why we keep coming back to daily word puzzles. There is something strangely comforting about daily puzzle games. For millions of people, games like Wordle became part of everyday life, not because they were loud or competitive, but because they created a small, structured mental challenge inside an otherwise busy day. One puzzle, one answer, one focused problem to solve. Unlike social media feeds that never end, daily puzzle games have clear boundaries. They begin, they challenge you, and then they are finished. That feeling of completion is surprisingly satisfying. The appeal of these games is much older than Wordle itself. Crossword puzzles turn language into a daily ritual. Mastermind, the board game, explored hidden information and logical deduction decades ago. Logic puzzles rewarded reasoning instead of speed or reflexes. Wordle brought many of these ideas to a much larger audience. The rules were simple. The game was quick. Everyone faced the same challenge each day. Players discussed strategies, compared results, and searched for new puzzle experiences. Over time, though, many players began looking for Wordle alternatives. Not necessarily easier games, or not necessarily harder games, but different forms of deduction and reasoning. That search helped create a new generation of daily deduction games, reasoning games, and logic puzzles that explored uncertainty in different ways. One example is Alphalock, our daily deduction game inspired by Wordle that focuses on information gathering and logical inference rather than positional hints. The growth of games like Wordle, Connections, Mastermind, and Alphalock suggests that people are not simply looking for word games. They are looking for more meaningful reasoning challenges. Why deduction games feel so satisfying. At the centre of almost every successful puzzle game is uncertainty, not randomness, not chaos, structured uncertainty. The player knows there is an answer. They simply do not yet have enough information to discover it. The gap between uncertainty and certainty creates tension. Solving the puzzle releases that tension. This is one reason deduction games feel so rewarding. Every clue matters. Every guess changes the landscape of possibilities. Wordle demonstrated this brilliantly. Each guess removes possibilities and narrows a search space. Players gradually transform uncertainty into certainty through inference. The human brain enjoys discovering hidden structure. That is part of what makes reasoning games and logic puzzles so engaging. In information theory, uncertainty is often associated with entropy. A well-designed deduction game carefully controls the amount of information available to the player. Too little information feels impossible. Too much information feels trivial. The most satisfying puzzle games exist somewhere in the middle. This balance appears across many successful games. Mastermind uses hidden patterns and indirect feedback. Crosswords use intersecting clues. Connections from NYT relies on semantic relationships. Wordle uses positional certainty and elimination. Alphalock uses aggregate information and deduction without direct positional hints. Each game creates a different relationship between information and reasoning. That is why players who enjoy deduction games often continue searching for new logic puzzles and alternative puzzle systems long after mastering a single game. How Wordle alternatives became more deduction-focused. After Wordle became globally popular, puzzle culture evolved very quickly. New puzzle games appeared everywhere. Some increased the scale, some focused on semantics, some explored probability, some became highly competitive, whilst others became more analytical. The most interesting Wordle alternatives did not simply become more difficult, they changed the thinking process itself. Some reward vocabulary, some reward memory, some reward intuition. Others reward careful deduction under uncertainty. And that is the example that you see with Alphalock. Alphalock is a daily deduction game and Wordle alternative that removes positional hints entirely. Instead of learning where letters belong, players must reason from aggregate feedback and progressively reduce the uncertainty. As a result, success depends less on vocabulary and more on deduction, information gathering, and puzzle strategy. Many players describe this style of game as a harder Wordle alternative because it requires careful logical reasoning rather than positional pattern matching. The experience feels fundamentally different. In Wordle, players often focus on locating letters. In Alphalock, players focus on extracting information. And the questions become, what guess reveals the most information? How much uncertainty remains? Which possibilities can be eliminated? How should the next guess maximize information gain? The puzzle becomes an exercise in reasoning rather than simple letter placement. That makes it particularly interesting to players who enjoy hard logic puzzles and deduction-based problem solving. Researchers have also explored games like Alphalock from the perspective of information theory and reinforcement learning because the puzzle naturally rewards information-efficient decision-making. That is relatively unusual for a modern daily word game. Most word games are discussed primarily as entertainment. Deduction-focused games can also become interesting models for studying reasoning under uncertainty. Why logic puzzles and deduction games remain popular. Deduction games occupy a unique psychological space. They reward patience without demanding intensity. A good deduction puzzle creates a feeling that the answer was always nearby, hidden inside the information the player already possessed but just not fully interpreted. That feeling is deeply satisfying because it mirrors how people naturally learn, not by receiving answers directly, but by uncovering structure. This is one reason logic puzzles continue surviving across generations. Mastermind, crosswords, logic grids, Wordle, and newer ones like Connections and Alphalock. All of them transform incomplete information into solvable patterns. Most importantly, they make thinking itself feel rewarding, and that is increasingly rare online. Many digital experiences compete for attention through speed and interruption. Deduction games often do the opposite. They encourage concentration, reflection, inference, pattern recognition. For a few minutes, players stop reacting and start reasoning. That may explain why people continue searching for harder Wordle alternatives, reasoning games, and challenging deduction puzzles. The appeal was never only about Wordle. The appeal was structured reasoning. Once players discover they enjoy deduction-based thinking, they often begin exploring many different puzzle systems built around uncertainty and logical inference. The future of harder Wordle alternatives. Daily puzzle games will likely continue evolving beyond the original Wordle format. Some will be more semantic, some more social, some more mathematical, some definitely more influenced by artificial intelligence. But the most interesting puzzle games will continue exploring the same fundamental question. How can a game create meaning from limited information? The question connects classic deduction games like Mastermind with modern games like Wordle and newer systems like Alphalock. It also explains why these games resonate so strongly with players, because they transform uncertainty into understanding, not through reflexes, not through grinding, but through reasoning. For Wordle players searching for hard logic puzzles, reasoning games, and daily deduction games, or harder Wordle alternatives, deduction-focused games such as Alphalock represent a different approach to puzzle design. They reward information gathering, logical inference, careful analysis, and strategic thinking. Perhaps that is why daily puzzle games continue attracting millions of players. For a few quiet minutes each day, they create a space for thoughtful reasoning, a space where uncertainty can be explored instead of avoided, and where logic becomes calming, where deduction becomes satisfying, and where solving a puzzle feels less like consuming content and more like discovering hidden structure. People were never only searching for another word game, they were searching for another form of meaningful reasoning. And that is why deduction-focused games from Mastermind to Wordle to Alphalock continue attracting players who enjoy transforming uncertainty into understanding, one clue at a time.